Good afternoon. I'm Reverend Dave Thompson. I'd like to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible study. Today we're continuing in the book of Matthew. And I'm a civil human minister, so what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. So as a civil human minister, the way I'm approaching this text and the scriptures today is really twofold. The first is that I want to be human. And so I'm coming at these scriptures just as a human being and trying to look at what I can take from this text and apply to all humans across the board, what I think are those teachings that can be applied across the board. And the second is that I want to be civil. So I want to do this with respect to the very basic shared human needs that we all have. Our need to believe what we want to about God and our creed, our need to be independent from intimidation and bullying, our need to vote for who will have control over us, our need to intimately love somebody of our own choosing, and our need to live the life that we want to live, however we want to dress and present ourselves. So those are the things that I'm doing when I'm approaching this Bible study. So let's go ahead and jump into Matthew chapter 12. We're continuing in Jesus' engagement with the religious leaders called the Pharisees. Last Bible study, we talked about the religious leaders and how they were smearing Jesus and how Jesus kind of countered that. And today, Jesus is actually going to throw out something pretty significant called the unforgivable sin. And as you can imagine, most people who read this phrase are trying to figure out what in the world that means because nobody wants to do a sin that is unforgivable, right? So let's go ahead and jump into the passage. Just Matthew chapter 12, and starting with verse 30. He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters abroad. Therefore I say to you, every sin and blasphemy will be forgiven for mankind, but the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven men. Anyone who speaks a word against the Son of Man, it will be forgiven him. But whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit, it will not be forgiven him, either in this age or in the age to come. So as you can imagine, when I was approaching this text, not only when I was, and as I continue as a student of Jesus, my background came from a fairly conservative group of Christianity. And so reading this passage, of course, I was overly concerned about what in the world that meant, because it seems kind of ambiguous, right? Well, what does that mean? Because nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to commit the crime or the wrongdoing that is going to completely end our ability to be released from it or to make ourselves well. And I want to talk some about the language that is in here. It really helps to clarify and understand what it is that Jesus is actually talking about. So in the end, it's not ambiguous, it's not super complicated. It makes sense what he's talking about, and it makes sense that it would be unpardonable. So let's go ahead and jump into the first verse, 30. So we have this analogy that whoever is with me, gathers with me, is with me, and whoever scatters is against me. So keep in mind, today's world and culture, we view ourselves in a different way than they used to. We actually, not until probably a couple hundred years ago or even 100 years ago, we started the changes of culture to see ourselves as being global, having people from all over the globe being a part of who we are, being a part of our culture, especially today where, I get to chat and show my show to people anywhere in the world right now. So I know that somebody in Africa or somebody in Russia or someone in Brazil, they are all part of my culture now because what they do drastically affects me here in the United States of America. In the past, it hasn't been that way, right? So we had nation states. In the past, we had National Geographic was the only way that we really got to see what other cultures were like here in the United States. And so there's this difference among us. We are unified at that time by our ethnicity and by our religion, by our basic cultural values. And today we're having to redefine that, which is a lot of my work right now. But I want to point out what exactly is different about the culture back here. So when Jesus says that he who scatters is against me, he who gathers is for me. This is a conversation about unity. This is a conversation about the society's ability to move forward in a positive way, or the society's the consequence of being divided. And so the word here for gathering is really a word that means to unite, or to bring or lead a group together for a good purpose. So Jesus is saying, whoever is gathering these people with me to teach them how to live a good life, to teach them how to be peacemakers, how to be compassionate, how to forgive others, how to have self-restraint and humility, that's what they're gathering around, those virtues. And then there's the other side, and that's those who divide. And this word is to scatter. So it's the idea of dicing it into pieces and throwing it out there. So the notion is that because there's no unity, there's no strength. There's no ability for society to come together and to have a unified purpose. And so it is actually self-defeating. And that's what Jesus is trying to point out here, that the Pharisees, the religious leaders of his time, they aren't doing anything to help people get to a place of peacemaking, or to find a better way of living for these individuals, or even healing the sick. They don't do that as much, really. They're more focused on ritual and about praying in public and about being politically influential. And Jesus is saying, look, you're not helping here. So you're actually scattering by dividing these people, by telling them that I'm, the prince of the demons, and that's why I'm casting demons out. By dividing us, you are making it even harder. So you're working against me. And then we get into this unforgivable sin thing, right? So what this really means, this unforgivable sin is what's called blasphemy of the Spirit, of the set aparts here, the Holy Spirit. So what does blasphemy mean, right? This is blasphemia in the Greek is a word that we get blasphemy from. And essentially it means that we're slandering somebody. Literally, the word is a combination of two words that means the word slow plus reputation. So it's this idea of somebody who hesitates to call somebody good who is good. In other words, there's somebody good out there, let's say Jesus, for example, and the Pharisees are being slow to acknowledge the fact that he's actually doing good things, healing sick people, helping people to become better, helping the society to come better, to follow after the rules of God and the universe that actually matter. So it's slander, essentially. So it's causing some people to think badly about somebody as a result of it. And it's causing injury to a person's name, and especially their reputation in their work. So this next part is pretty important. And that is the term Holy Spirit here. We've talked about spirit before, right? So it comes from this Hebrew word, the Jewish word for spirit, breath, or wind, ruach, and is now translated pneuma in the Greek. So it is essentially the life force of a person. And the reason why it's the same as breath and wind is, if you think about it, when somebody passes away, the reason why we know that is we check for breathing. When a person stops breathing, they stop living. And when they breathe, they are living. And in the minds of this ancient society, that's really the only way to look at life and death. They don't have a sense of brain death or really even of circulation, checking for pulse, those types of things. They really would just look for breath. And so it became this idea of looking at the wind as being a force that blows and moves and gives off a reaction or an action to the trees and to whatever is blowing through. That breath is something that comes out of a person. It's a giving off of an energy or a perspective or like a demeanor. And so it also became known as this inner part, or this life force would be the best translation for it. It's this element within all of us that we have that makes us alive versus all the other stuff that isn't alive. And this word holy, right? Holy Spirit, the word holy here is from the Hebrew also, meaning kadesh, and now is being used to kind of qualify what the Spirit is that he's talking about, literally what this means is Jesus is saying, do not slander against the life force and the Spirit that is set apart for God. In other words, though it literally could be translated, if you wanted to, as the Holy Spirit, meaning this person of God, it's not exactly clear in this text whether that's what Jesus means, or if it's to be loosely translated to mean that it's simply the life force or essence of God's work. I'm going to go with that because it's a little bit more easy to transfer across the board to all humans. When we think about what Jesus is doing here, yes, there is some religious components to it in the fact that Jesus is Jewish and he's pointing to Yahweh, which is this Jewish God. But on the other hand, Jesus is completely aware of the fact that he is basically teaching the laws of the universe, how to live in this world that has all of the truth and reality around us. What is the best way to live in this universe that will produce the best benefits for everybody? What will make us happy and what will make society happy as a whole? Yes, you could be greedy and selfish and live for yourself, but generally speaking, that happiness only goes skin deep and people will not like you as a result of it. So peacemaking, humility, compassion, these are the rules that work best in this chaotic universe that we have, that give us the best chance of living a happy life and being happy ourselves. And so when Jesus is now qualifying this, he's talking to the Pharisees and he's pointing out to them, and they knew exactly what Jesus was talking about in this context. When Jesus says to them that the only thing that will not be forgiven, and again, the word forgiven here means to be let go of, to let loose of something, to let it go, forgive somebody. That the only thing that can't be let go is those people who slander the things that are good. So we're talking about individuals who actively fight against peacemaking, which means that they actively work to divide people or to divide groups or to divide communities, because those communities will eventually fail, and that's not going to make a happy society. Peacemaking is. Compassion is going to be a good thing for society. And Jesus is mentioning to these Pharisees and placing them in a position where they're like, this is good for everybody, not just for our faith, not just for you, but for all of our society and the world in general. Why are you fighting against this? When you're doing that, you are essentially causing the greatest suffering for people because you're removing their chance to experience happiness and for society to experience happiness. So that's probably why he qualifies it as not forgivable. It's not like something where I mess up in life or I make some poor choices. We're talking about somebody, especially who is in a position of privilege like these religious leaders, who are actively fighting against the work of God, who are actually fighting against good things. And that is despicable. I'd like to tie this a little bit into our modern age a little bit. We all are probably a little tired of watching the news or reading the news. I know I have to do it in staggering times, because if I read it too much, which I have a tendency to do, I'll just get overwhelmed with how much just division and frustration and anger there is out there. As we engage these leaders that we have, and as we engage the community out there, we each day have to make a choice of whether we are going to participate in making our society and making ourselves happy, or if we're going to participate in destroying society, dividing society, which will actually end up hurting us. And so the worst thing that we can possibly do is to speak negatively about somebody who is doing something good, because those people are oftentimes few and far between. The kind of people who are willing to step up and to stand against division and anger and mercilessness, those people are going to face a lot of challenges. So I might leave off with this comment and encouragement to you as much as I'm trying to think of it. If you know somebody who is trying to do something good, that they're actually, whether they're picketing, whether they're, working at a homeless shelter, whether they're feeding the homeless, whatever it is, I would like to ask that you encourage them. Give them a call, write them an email. If you see them during the day, get together with them and tell them how much you appreciate them so that they can be refreshed, so that they can continue this work rather than dividing or being negative or pointing out things that they need to change. Let's encourage each other to do these good things. I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being a part of this Bible study. It really means the world to me because this is a journey that I'm going through as a human being, trying to look at the things that I can learn from this book, which is my particular faith background. And I'm looking forward to the comments and reflections that you'll share in the comment section. Please do that. It helps me and it helps everyone else to better understand things. And last, I want to say to you that I love you. And I hope that you choose to love yourself. It is the only love that we have any control over in this world. And now I invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our day, loving our neighbors the same way. Thank you.